Hello and welcome to the channel. Gav Axeman Spins with a change to the planned video. We've had some sad news this week in the UK that we've lost one of the great drummers in one of the great bands of all time. So we're talking about Rick Buckler, the drummer of that legendary three-piece from the late 70s who split up at the height of their success, and I'm talking obviously about the Jam. Much loved band, I still think greatly missed, and obviously thoughts whenever you're doing these kind of videos. Although I'm a fan of the band, obviously there were family members and friends that have lost a loved one. So thoughts as ever with those. And my own story, I thought I'd just kind of do my own story of the Jam. I did do some videos on Paul Weller and the bands that he was in before his solo stuff. And there was a huge, I say huge, but, you know, a lot for a channel of my size, commentary all about the Jam. There are a lot of Jam fans out there that are still distraught 40 years on that the band was kind of pulled at the height of its success. I don't think a lot of them thought that they've ever been bettered by Paul Weller, and that's debatable. But I think one thing that everyone can say is they are and were one of the great singles bands of all time. I put their singles catalogue up against anyone, including the obvious ones. Fabulous band, great B-sides. What I love about the Jam is they had a beginning, a middle, and an end. So they're in that immortal category of bands that start well but get bigger and bigger and bigger. They have that lovely middle period where success is raining in on them. Number one single, sold out tours, artistically raising the game with every release. But they had the genius move, and I think it was genius, to go out at the top. And their final singles are as good as their first singles, they're as good as their middle singles, and their records got to sound better and better. They incorporated new sounds, and I think they'd done, in Paul Weller's eyes, as much as they could do, and they wisely, in my opinion, called it a day at that kind of peak. Sadly for me, that meant I never got to see the Jam. I was only 11 when they split up. I do have memories of the Jam. I remember, in the old school playground in between games of football, when you got to sort of like 11, 12, music started to become a little bit more important and fashion. So we'd talk about things like the Jam going to number one, we're going underground. I do remember the whole two-tone movement started to introduce fashion into school. So people started having Harrington jackets and Doc Martens, and the haircuts got shorter. And obviously I do remember when it came through that the Jam would be no more and that Beat Surrender would be their final single. And I don't really know anyone who didn't like the Jam. I think they were one of those bands that were just universally kind of loved. But they'd split up really before I could go and see them live. I didn't really follow what came next by Paul Weller. I didn't really get into his stuff till he went solo, really. But I always loved the Jam, and always had that soundtrack was still there. So, you remember going to school discos, and Town Called Malice was one of those great songs, wasn't it, that still sounds fresh as a daisy now. And when you listen to the lyrics, it's got that biting social commentary that's as relevant now as it was then. The UK at the moment, times are tough. You go to some of our town centres, and particularly the smaller ones, and they're not great places. That you can see the decay, unfortunately. I don't know what's to blame, but I'm not a politician, but I can think of a few targets. But that band was just everything for a time, weren't they? And they are phenomenal. So I'm just going to share my story of my journey with the Jam and what made me kind of really appreciate them, just as my little tribute and penny's worth to the passing of a third of one of the great all-time bands whose legacy is up there with anyone. So my first kind of exposure to the Jam beyond listening to some of the songs on the radio was when I had my very first car, which was a blue Mini that I systematically destroyed over an 18-month period. How I'm still here to tell that tale, I do not know. But instead of doing what I should have been doing, which was studying at college, I was ferrying people here, there and everywhere, playing an awful lot of snooker. And music became really important, because in your first car you also have, if you're lucky, in those days, your first cassette player, and mixtapes and C90s suddenly became incredibly important, because instead of listening to music at home in your bedroom, it was out and about. And I started to listen to a lot of bands that had passed me by in my youth, so bands like Blondie, The Police. But I had a mate called Mike who was playing a mixtape, and on one side was Brian Ferry Roxy Music, the other side was The Jam. And I think it was his sister's boyfriend then at the time had done him a compilation of the key jam tracks. I obviously found out afterwards that actually what he'd done is he'd got a copy of the Greatest Hits album Snap, and had picked out his favourite songs. So I'd got 45 minutes of the Jam, and that tape lived in that car permanently. And what I loved about the Jam is great driving music, because it's aggressive and it's in your face, and right from the get-go, that opening single In the City right to Beat Surrender at the end, it was a great 45 minutes of music. But obviously I didn't realise there was an awful lot that had been kicked out. So when I got my first CD player, the first CD I bought was this one, called Compact Snap. And for many years this was my go-to Jam CD, and actually in a way it still is, because it does, and I found out later, emit 8 tracks from the original album, but it emits some album tracks and B-sides, and it just really streamlines the singles, some of the key kind of B-sides of the time, and a couple of album tracks. So it's a proper streamlined thing, and of course it highlights how wonderful a singles band they were. As I said, from In the City through to Going Underground to Town Called Malice and finally Beat Surrender, an absolutely phenomenal singles band. What's even more important is a lot of the singles weren't on the album, so if you bought the albums by the Jam and you haven't got a copy of Snap, you are missing out, because a lot of their greatest songs are on there. And we're talking about the drumming of Rick Butler, and there's one track that I think is a perfect example of that, and that's Funeral Pyre. And reading this week, a lot of the fans of that's the one that they've been talking about. It was quite sad this week as well, because Rick Buckler was going to do some kind of talk at the Wolverhampton Art Gallery, and I think it was announced about 3 weeks ago, and I thought, well, that'd be interesting to go see, and I was going to know Arwen who I could lasso to go, and then obviously his appearance got cancelled, and the event got cancelled the night he was going to do because of his ill health, and we now know obviously it was pretty serious. So I never got to see that, but I did have Compact Snap for many years. But eventually, when I got rekindled my record player in the 2000s and something, and started buying vinyl again, one of the very first things I did was run out and buy a copy of the proper Snap in all its full glory, because if there is one essential compilation by a band, this is it. This ticks all the boxes. I think I had a look at the track listing before I made the video, and there's only one song, which is Carnation, that isn't on here, that I possibly think was a big admittance, but other than that, the whole album is pretty essential. It's got key album tracks, every single, a lot of the B-sides, not all, but more important, it's got some of those A-sides that weren't on albums. So Going Underground, When You're Young, what a song that is, Strange Town. It's got some of the single edits as well, so the version of Down in the Tube Station at Midnight on here is better, I think, than the album version. It's got the demo of That's Entertainment that is far better than the version that's on Sound Effects, in my opinion. So it's a great album, this, and it's one of the classic compilations. But when I first heard this, it wasn't the full Snap, because the initial copies came with a free live EP. So I eventually, you guessed it, managed to track one down, and there it is, tucked in there. So really, this weekend for Saturday Kids, I think the only band I'm going to be playing is the Jam, and I'm just going to play this album once again. It's been far too long since I've listened to it, so I'm back with it. I'll leave you with some music and some photos of Rick. Rest in peace. A legacy to have played in one of the greatest bands of all time. You can't really ask for much more than that. And a wonderful musician, wonderful drummer in a wonderful band. And you know, he will live on, and they will live on long after we're all gone, because the music is timeless. I think a lot of its themes and a lot of the lyrics are as relevant today as they ever were. So the wonderful Jam. Thank you for watching. Tell me your thoughts on the Jam and any memories. I know when I did my videos on the Jam before, there's an awful lot of people in the vinyl community and on YouTube that had seen them live and were sharing those tales. But if you want to leave any messages to each other about what they meant to you, feel free in the comments. But if you just want to put some music on and jump around the room, that's probably what I'll be doing. So thanks for watching, and I'll leave you with some of the wonderful drums of Rick Buckler.